About 66 million years ago, on the land that is now present-day Mexico, two of the largest creatures that had ever walked the earth were locked in a life-or-death battle to keep their bloodlines alive. On one side stood the ferocious meat-eating T-Rex. On the other stood the plant-eating Triceratops. It was a fight so intense that both sides knew only one of them would walk away alive. But who would it be? Could a vegetarian dinosaur possibly be powerful enough to defeat a carnivore of the same size? Or was victory destined to go to the meat-eater? In this ultimate showdown between the largest herbivore and the largest carnivore of that era, who do you think emerged victorious? Now take a look at these. These are the Jurassic-period Megalosaurus, Allosaurus, Ichthyosaurus, and Plesiosaurus. Out of these four creatures, only three made it from the Jurassic into the Cretaceous period, and by the time they arrived, they had evolved. If you think this matchup is going to be anything like what you're imagining, you are 100% wrong. The real matchup is something completely different. Look at the two creatures above. The first one is the ancestor of all mammals, yet it still laid eggs. The second one, despite the dominance of egg-laying animals, developed a kangaroo-like pouch inside its body to carry and protect its babies. So was the Cretaceous period a time when a special kind of bizarre environment triggered weird, out-of-the-box genetic mutations? Or were all these changes simply the result of natural survival strategies? Well, in today's third and final episode of our Dinosaur series, we are going to cover all these questions step by step in the form of a story. That way, you will be able to experience for yourself exactly what the Cretaceous period was really like, and the mystery of how evolution was playing out during that time will be solved in your mind forever. You will also see how the most powerful creatures in Earth's history, the dinosaurs, reached their ultimate potential, only to witness their own extinction. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Dinosaur the Fall. In the previous episode, you saw that about 145 million years ago, at the end of the Jurassic period, the supercontinent Pangaea was slowly breaking apart into smaller pieces. Volcanoes were erupting everywhere, and the deadly gases they released had begun to blanket the entire planet. This wasn't some brand new, unheard of event. Earth's history has seen this happen many times. Every few hundred million years, the shifting tectonic plates cause supercontinents to form and then break apart. But this time, the event was different. While the supercontinent was tearing apart, many mature creatures on Earth were watching with their own eyes as it destroyed their fellow beings. The atmosphere was so harsh that every living thing, big or small, was desperately gasping for fresh air and even a single drop of clean water. Because of these extreme conditions, almost 55% of dinosaur species went extinct in the blink of an eye. Only a handful of creatures survived. The mammal ancestors known as mammaliaforms, the dangerous carnivores Megalosaurus and Allosaurus, the herbivores Brachiosaurus and Stegosaurus, the flying Archaeopteryx, and finally, the marine reptiles Ichthyosaurus and Plesiosaurus. These were the survivors who would carry Earth's story forward. But the big question is, why did evolution specifically choose them? And why did the carnivorous dinosaurs suddenly start getting bigger? Well, that is exactly what today's story is about, so let's begin. About 145 million years ago, the constant volcanic eruptions had caused carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere to rise to 2 or 3 times what they are today. The hardest hit were the trees and plants. The extra CO2 had raised Earth's average temperature by 3 degrees. I know what you're thinking. How could just a 3-degree rise kill off plants? Let me explain. The average temperature we talk about is the overall figure that balances the freezing cold at the poles with the scorching heat at the equator. It keeps all of nature's systems in equilibrium. Even a 1-degree increase is enough to start melting polar ice. Back then, the temperature had risen by 3 full degrees. With fewer trees and plants available for food, the herbivorous dinosaurs of the Jurassic period had become completely extinct by the time this new era arrived. Because the herbivores suddenly disappeared, a massive gap opened up in the food chain. This gave trees and plants a chance to spread across the planet once again. But remember, plants are the primary source of energy in the food chain. Until new plant eaters appeared, even the carnivores would struggle to find food. To fill this empty niche, large herbivorous bird-hipped ornithischians such as Iguanodon and Protoceratops began to evolve once more. As soon as these new dinosaurs appeared, they cleverly developed a very important adaptation to survive in the hot climate: thermoregulation. They redesigned their faces and evolved beaks instead of jaws. These beaks were packed with blood vessels that could contract to keep the body warm or expand to cool it down. This allowed them to regulate their body heat and survive the rising temperatures. While this was happening on land, the egg-laying mammalia forms living under the feet of these giant herbivores were also showing some remarkable changes. To save energy, they completely changed their method of reproduction. Instead of laying eggs, they began developing their babies inside their own bodies. Food was extremely scarce at the time. If they had continued laying eggs, all the energy their bodies produced would have been spent making thick eggshells. Eggs also need a lot of oxygen, which can only diffuse through the tiny pores in the shell when oxygen levels outside are high. But oxygen was very low during this period, so developing babies inside the body and supplying them oxygen through an umbilical cord became the most efficient survival strategy for the mammalia forms. However, this survival tactic had its own problems. If you have to grow a living being inside you, the food you eat now has to support 2 lives instead of 1. Someone has to compromise. You might think the mother would be the one to sacrifice, but actually it was the baby. If the mother compromised and became prey, both she and the baby would die. So the mammalia forms developed an interesting adaptation. They started giving birth to premature babies and then feeding them outside the body using a special pouch. This is how they evolved into the marsupial mammals, the ancestors of kangaroos. This allowed them to protect both their own lives and their babies while still being able to search for food. Because of these advantages, creatures with this structure began to increase rapidly in number. In short, the mammalia forms focused entirely on boosting their population numbers, so that even if 80 out of 100 died, at least 20 would survive to carry the species forward. But some creatures of that time had an even better adaptation. The large carnivorous theropods, such as Megalosaurus, developed a technique to survive in the low-oxygen environment. They began evolving a unidirectional respiratory system, which eventually turned them into Spinosaurus. In this new system, inhalation and exhalation happen simultaneously. Normally, lungs depend completely on the oxygen concentration in the outside air. If oxygen drops, we suffocate. But with the new system, a large air sac formed before the lungs. Air and oxygen would first collect and concentrate in this sac, then pass into the lungs. This meant the lungs never ran out of oxygen. That is why creatures like Spinosaurus could easily survive in the low oxygen conditions of that time. By now, every creature, whether small or large, had adapted in some way to stay alive in the hot, low oxygen environment. Soon, the battle on land was no longer just about surviving, it was about thriving. A war for dominance had begun. As the fighting intensified, territory on land started to feel too small. Gradually, the battle spread into the oceans. Rising temperatures and melting polar ice caused sea levels to rise, leading to floods everywhere. These floods changed the chemistry of all freshwater sources, lakes and rivers, by increasing the amount of salts and minerals. Marine life in the oceans began to thrive because of this. On land, however, the situation was completely different. There were far more predators than prey, so some dinosaurs even started eating their own young. For the land animals, there was only one option left: move into the water to hunt. Many dinosaurs, including Spinosaurus, adopted new evolutionary tactics. They developed webbed structures between their toes, like a duck's, lengthened their tails, and grew balloon-like organs to help them float. These changes were so dramatic that their bodies and genetics transformed, turning Spinosaurus into the semi-aquatic Mosasaurus. They quickly became the apex predators of the sea. This was also the moment when chaos erupted in the oceans. Now 3 giant predators lived there together, the Mosasaurus, plus the 2 Jurassic survivors, Ichthyosaurus and Plesiosaurus. All 3 were competing for the same thing: small fish. As time passed, prey became scarce, and all 3 began to starve. The cunning Mosasaurus first targeted the smaller Ichthyosaurus and started hunting them. As a result, Ichthyosaurus gradually went extinct. Seeing their numbers drop, the Mosasaurus turned their attention to the Plesiosaurus. But before the Mosasaurus could attack, the Plesiosaurus made a clever evolutionary move. They noticed that the Mosasaurus's greatest strengths were their teeth and huge size, so they evolved countermeasures. They increased their own body size and developed long, spear-like teeth. With these adaptations, they evolved into the Pliosaurus. So in the early Cretaceous period, Spinosaurus ruled the land, Mosasaurus and Plesiosaurus ruled the water, and the Jurassic survivor Archaeopteryx ruled the skies, completely unchallenged. But very soon, the most ferocious dinosaur that had ever walked the Earth was about to be born and challenge all 3. By the mid-Cretaceous, the breakup of Pangaea had sped up. Earthquakes and floods became daily occurrences. The worst affected were insects and the small mammals living on land, because the earthquakes and floods destroyed the trees and plants completely. This triggered a chain reaction. The insects that fed on the plants died, and then the mammals that fed on the insects began starving to death. To stay alive, some mammals started adapting to eat the carcasses of dead dinosaurs instead of insects. But scavenging in broad daylight meant becoming easy prey for larger dinosaurs. So these mammals began hunting for food only at night, under the cover of darkness. Seeing this change in the mammals' behavior, Archaeopteryx seized the opportunity and adapted to nocturnal hunting as well. For this, they needed 2 things: extremely sharp eyesight that could spot small mammals in the dark, and lightning-fast speed to catch them in the blink of an eye. To make this structural evolution possible, Archaeopteryx began changing their round pupils into vertical slits, which capture maximum light. This dramatically improved their night vision. With these changes, Archaeopteryx evolved into the Velociraptor. These velociraptors were so vicious that they began hunting not only small mammals, but also herbivorous dinosaurs like Protoceratops. Now Protoceratops had to defend themselves against 2 predators, the longtime threat Allosaurus and the newly evolved Velociraptor. So they poured all their energy into strengthening their defenses. They evolved 3 sharp horns on their heads and a tough bony plate around their vulnerable necks. These changes turned Protoceratops into Triceratops. This made it much harder for creatures like Allosaurus to hunt them. The surviving Allosaurus had no choice but to evolve once again to break through these strong defenses. They increased their body size and made their teeth even sharper, so sharp that they could tear the flesh off an even larger dinosaur's neck in a single bite. In fact, they strengthened their jaws so powerfully that they could crush an average-sized car to pieces with one bite. By this point, the Allosaurus had evolved into the most fearsome dinosaur of all time, Tyrannosaurus rex, the T-Rex. Hunting any dinosaur had now become child's play for them. Thanks to these adaptations, the T-Rex held the upper hand. It was now time for the Triceratops to answer. Instead of running away from the ferocious T-Rex, they would charge straight at it. Attack became their new defense. This strategy worked so well that it even forced the T-Rex to start living and hunting in packs for safety. Their rivalry is still considered the most dangerous in dinosaur history. One day, a Triceratops was wandering through the jungle in search of food when a pack of young T-Rex suddenly surrounded it. But the clever Triceratops tricked the pack and fled out of the jungle. Little did it know it was running straight into an even bigger trap. As soon as it emerged from the trees, a group of fully grown adult T-Rex was already waiting. The Triceratops realized too late that the young ones had deliberately herded it into this ambush. Now it was do or die. The Triceratops decided to fight the entire pack of T-Rex. A ferocious battle erupted. The Triceratops attacked with its horns while the T-Rex slashed with their teeth. But who would win in the end? You see, if it had been a one-on-one fight, the Triceratops would almost certainly have ripped the T-Rex's guts out with its horns. But just like lions, the T-Rex hunted in packs and had surrounded the Triceratops from all sides. Unfortunately, the meat-eating T-Rex won the day. From this story, we learn that the T-Rex were truly undefeatable at that time, but only for a while. While this battle was raging on land, a 10-kilometer-wide meteor was hurtling toward Earth from the sky at terrifying speed. It would eventually turn the planet into a barren wasteland covered in corpses. And if you're watching this video, you've probably already seen the first two parts of the series as well, because this is the third and final episode. If this video taught you something new and you enjoy deep dive storytelling like this, drop your suggestions in the comments. What should we explore next in this style? And if you found it interesting, pass it along to your friends so they can learn and enjoy it too. That's all for now. I'll catch you in the next video.